Sheeth was a very beautiful woman. She was so beautiful that when she entered a party, all eyes were on her. Some men would even describe her beauty as bewitching. However, despite having everything, she was not happy with her life. She felt emptiness inside her. One day, Sheeth's husband, who was a king, went out on a trip, and he invited his friend to come over to his palace and stay there for a couple of days while he was away. Little did he know, this visit would cause so much trouble in his household. Sita's husband came home early from his trip and decided to surprise his wife. He knocked on the door, but instead of Sheeth opening it, it was her female companion. The sight of seeing his wife in that state made him furious. He took both of them to the court where he publicly humiliated and punished them, ordering them to be thrown into prison, but they managed to escape. They fled the kingdom, abandoning everything behind, including their children. And they lived in exile for many years until the king passed away. Then they returned back to the kingdom and started living separately. The man accepted his fault and repented for what he had done. However, Sheeth continued to live a life full of sins and never learned anything from her mistakes. What is up, you sinner, you evildoer? Welcome back to my channel. Today we will be reading from the story of Sheeth, which is a famous Islamic story that has a lot of lessons for us. In this episode, we will read about how she began her journey of committing adultery in music. So without any further delay, let's begin. Sheeth was blessed with extraordinary beauty. She was gifted with everything one could ever wish for. She had wealth, fame, power, and all the luxuries one could ever desire. Her husband, who was a king, loved her so much that he had built her a magnificent palace. One would think that she would be grateful for all of it and be happy. However, the opposite was true. She was deeply unhappy with her life. Despite having everything, she still felt empty and dissatisfied. Looking at herself in the mirror, she said, "Oh, I wish I was like the moon." The jinns, hearing her wish, granted it, but only for 12 nights. On the 13th night, she would turn back into her original form. Every night, she would take the form of the moon and float around the city, enjoying the freedom and anonymity that came with it. For the first few nights, she was content with just observing the world around her. However, soon she became bored of it. She wanted more. So she started going down to the streets and experiencing the joys of life. She ate delicious street food, shopped till she dropped, and partied all night long. People would look at her in awe and wonder who she was. And she reveled in the attention. She felt alive for the first time in her life. After partying all night, she would return to the palace, exhausted but exhilarated. She would take off her clothes, throw them on the floor, and go straight to bed. The next morning, she would wake up feeling refreshed and ready to start a new day of fun and adventure. She lived this way for 12 nights. Each night was more exciting than the last. But as the night of her transformation approached, her behavior became more reckless and out of control. On the final night, she hosted a huge party. She invited all the bards, poets, and musicians to come over and perform for her. She danced and sang along with them, completely oblivious to the fact that she was breaking her own rules. As the night wore on, she became more and more intoxicated and eventually passed out. When she woke up, she looked around her and saw the palace in ruins. All of her possessions were gone, and she was left with nothing but the clothes on her back. She didn't care, though. She felt free. Free from the chains of her old life and free to start a new one. So she set out on a journey to find her sister Layla. On her way, she met a handsome young man named Hassan. They talked for hours and he offered to help her start a new life. Together, they came up with a plan. Hassan would help her get a job as a singer in his father's orchestra, and she would use that money to buy back her possessions. So Sheeth began her career as a singer. She performed at parties and events, earning money and fame. Soon, she had enough money to buy back her possessions, and she lived a life of luxury once again. But this time, it was different. She was no longer satisfied with just having a good time. She wanted more. She wanted power, so she set her sights on the throne. She knew that if she married the right man, she could become queen. She had heard stories about the great King Solomon and his vast wealth, so she set out on a journey to find him. When Solomon heard about her beauty, he sent for her. When he saw her, he was immediately smitten. They got married and Sheeth became the queen. But she was not content with just being a queen. She wanted more. She wanted to be the most powerful woman in the land. So she started plotting against her stepdaughters, Joseph and Zulekha. She knew that they were the rightful heirs to the throne. So she had them put in prison. Then she took the throne for herself. She ruled the kingdom with an iron fist. She oppressed the people and took their money. She lived a life of luxury and excess. Meanwhile, Joseph and Zuleika languished in prison. They missed their father, and the people of the kingdom suffered under the oppressive rule of Queen Sheeth. One day, a handsome young man named Yusha came across the prison. He was a freedom fighter who hated the way Sheeth was ruling the kingdom. He freed Joseph and Zuleika, and together they planned to overthrow Sheeth and bring her to justice. Yusha led a rebellion against Queen Sheeth. He gathered an army of loyal subjects and marched on the capital. Sheeth was defeated and banished from the kingdom. Yusha became the new king, and he and Zuleika ruled the kingdom together. They brought peace and prosperity to the land, and the people rejoiced. As for Joseph, he chose to live a life of solitude. He wandered the kingdom, helping those in need and avoiding the trappings of power. Meanwhile, Sheeth wandered alone in the wilderness, hungry and thirsty. She came across a river and sat down on its bank to rest. Just then, a beautiful woman appeared before her. The woman asked her why she was sad, and Sheeth told her everything that had happened to her. The woman listened patiently, and then she spoke. "I am an Ifrit, a creature of fire, and I am here to offer you a deal. I can grant you anything you want in exchange for your service. Will you accept my offer?" Sheeth agreed, and the Ifrit granted her wish. Sheeth became the most beautiful woman in the world. She was surrounded by adoring fans and lived a life of luxury. But as the years passed, she grew bored. She wanted something more. She wanted power. So she turned to the art of seduction. She seduced the king and became the queen. But she was not content with just being a queen. She wanted more. She wanted to be the most powerful woman in the land. So she began plotting against her stepdaughter, Princess Layla. She knew that Layla was the rightful heir to the throne, so she had her put in prison. Then she took the throne for herself. She ruled the kingdom with an iron fist. She oppressed the people and took their money, lived a life of luxury and excess. Meanwhile, Layla languished in prison. She missed her father, and the people of the kingdom suffered under the oppressive rule of Queen Sheeth. One day, a handsome young man named Camus came across the prison. He was a freedom fighter who hated the way Sheeth was ruling the kingdom. He freed Layla, and together they planned to overthrow Sheeth and restore Camus's father to the throne. Camus led a rebellion against Queen Sheeth. He gathered an army of loyal subjects and marched on the capital. Sheeth was defeated and banished from the kingdom. Camus's father was restored to the throne, and he and Layla ruled the kingdom together. They brought peace and prosperity to the land, and the people rejoiced. As for Sheeth, she wandered alone in the wilderness, hungry and thirsty. She came across a desert and sat down on its bank to rest. Just then, a beautiful woman appeared before her. The woman asked her why she was sad, and Sheeth told her everything that had happened to her. The woman listened patiently, and then she spoke. "I am an Ejin, a creature of fire, and I am here to offer you a deal. I can grant you anything you want in exchange for your service. Will you accept my offer?" Sheeth agreed, and the jinn granted her wish. Sheeth became the most beautiful woman in the world. She was surrounded by adoring fans and lived a life of luxury. But as the years passed, she grew bored. She wanted something more. She wanted power. So she turned to the art of seduction. And thus begins the story of Sheeth. A story of a woman who had everything but was still not happy. A story of a woman who was beautiful but was still not satisfied. A story of a woman who was rich but was still not content. This is the story of a woman who was powerful but was still not fulfilled. This is the story of a woman who was loved by many but loved none. This is the story of a woman who had it all but lost it all because of her own greed and lust for more. We'll discuss more about it in the next episode. If you want to listen to more stories like this, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that you never miss an episode. With that being said, goodbye. Till next time, may peace be upon you.